Oh yeah, we're live.
Perfect.
Pretty live.
Just leave this off here for a little bit. Just leave it sitting like that. See where the evening goes. When it's ready to go. Whatever.
See some folks filter back in here.
Sure. It's no fun when you can't
Participate.
when you can't see what's going on. Crazy we had a couple of real bad road condition days, and right off the hop there we ended up with several funerals. That was a rough start.
Some really well-known local folks, unfortunately.
Very, very sad. So actually, I just got a few. That was what the dinging was about. Whew.
Yeah.
That's a better view, anyways.
Much better.
One more back in. That'll work too in a minute. We'll go down here for half an hour or so. Taylor, how you doing? I think Taylor was one of the winners from a few lives ago.
Probably was, yeah.
And I
you get him a cup?
I didn't. I fell short on that. I gotta say, I fell short. I was found wanting. There, you're back. Is that better, Chad? Is that quite a bit better?
Better view. We're here for your viewing pleasure.
Viewing pleasure. Did you got your hay bales yet?
No, I still got to make my way up there.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Maybe we should road trip it.
Trying to coordinate my father-in-law, but anyway, that's not going to work. We're just going to have to do it ourselves. So, yeah, one day if you're not busy.
Let's road trip it. I've never been up to Chad's, so we just got to road trip it.
Be awesome.
I gotta take him. I gotta give him a sales speech. I gotta get him on some things.
Get him on.
So that's way better.
Some molasses.
So he's got to get on it.
I got a question about this molasses.
He's a fighter.
So
he's a fighter.
You put some molasses in a watering can, and then you just expertly with your penmanship wrote your name in the lawn.
Did you watch that?
Oh, I did, and I didn't watch the writing, but I just saw whatever the effect was, and I was like, I could not believe how much greener and thicker that grass was just right there.
The wife was not impressed, and I got to be honest, I wasn't either. I didn't believe that was going to do that.
Who would even think that, right?
Well, I mean, I hoped it would. That was the whole reason I bought it.
Sure.
Like, that was the whole reason that we put that formula together, that formulation. But I wouldn't have.
But how did that do in the field? Because I don't think that wasn't as prevalent in the field, right?
On the cereals, it was a 20 bushel yield.
Okay, so significant.
Well, can it be duplicated? I don't know. And to be honest, we based it off that monitor, which that monitor's never been calibrated. So it was just a reference to it was better than where it wasn't.
Right.
We don't know what to extent. A guy would need to get a weigh wagon in the oil seeds and in the pulses. It didn't seem to do anything, but I'm sure for your oats, your barley, your wheat, I'm sure it would.
So did you ever think though, like when you did the field, to just run like a shame strip, and then you don't spray on one strip and then just see like in terms of plant quality and like how green it is, how good it looks, how big the seed heads are.
Well, that's what we had done. We only sprayed about 40 or 60 acres of that field, of that 150 acres.
Okay.
And I seeded it east and west, and I sprayed it north and south. And then they combined it east and west. So they had to drive in and then out of the molasses every round.
Okay.
So they could see the monitor go up and down every time they went in and out of it.
Sure.
So that's kind of how we did that. I did want to get into a bunch of feed samples. I wanted to do some straw samples. I wanted to do actually keep the seed separate to see if the protein in the seed had changed.
Right.
But
really interesting.
Well, as we were talking earlier, just before we started this, it just got too busy. I don't even know what's happened in the last, say, 2.5, 3 years, but it seems like these high seasons, they just come and go. Like it seems like we get seeding on the 22nd of April or the 28th of April, and we're done on the 13th of May. It's just like in and out, and things seem to be rolling so well that you don't want to risk stopping and doing something something. And I guess a guy in these years, he should, because when we cycle back into the tough years where every day is a fight, then you're definitely not going to want to stop.
Totally. Yeah.
So, and this fall was no different. I had planned, I had marked it. I knew where it was. I know the guy that bailed it, I had even said off the start, I was like, we should get a bale from each side. And then we just never did. Okay. They got loaded on and hauled out, and now they're all mixed together. So,
right. Interesting though.
But next year I'm going to try to cut out some of this extra stuff, all this custom work and consulting, if you will, because it's really, well, it's eating into my time, and it's actually starting to just destroy my mental health too, right? Trying to organize, and it's just the return on investment isn't there,
right?
You're expending a lot of energy and time, and if you're getting paid at all, it's probably not worth it.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, I'd be interested as a grass guy, as a guy that's trying to raise livestock off the grass. I would be interested to see the results you would yield on grass as well, right?
Well,
would it sustain regrowth? Would the protein content, sugar content be higher in the grass as it grows? Would the roots grow any deeper? Does it do anything? I mean, the whole premise is that it feeds the soil, and the soil feeds the grass, right?
Absolutely.
It feeds the enzymes in the soil, right? So that's what really makes me curious.
And I had fully intended on loading that sprayer up and coming and doing this slope here, doing 15 acres of it.
I think it'd
doing
be magical.
different. See, on the lawn, that's probably like a 50-50 split between molasses and water. Out in the field was 2 gallons an acre. Right. So you're looking at, I don't know exactly what the percentage is, but quite a bit less, right? You put 180 gallons into 800 gallons of water.
But I've even seen there's gardening channels out there where they're like, yeah, take 2 tablespoons of molasses that you would bake cookies with and put it in water and spread it on your plants or whatever.
Well, there's nothing new about adding
sugars to soil.
Sugars or and enhancing microbiology and bacteria. There's nothing new to this. And I think, and I've talked to actually quite a few guys about it over the summer, over the growing season, and for too long, we've just shifted to that commercial intense operating.
Right.
And we've gotten we've shifted from the plow of the
the
1900s.
Yeah.
And then we've never got back into adding true organic matter back into the soil. We've added a lot of fertilizer, and then there's even some articles that are pointing it out now that you're starting to see the fertilizer bill is going up, and the yield is kind of there. If you get the rain, you get a good yield. If you don't, you get an okay yield. But it's only there because the fertilizer is going up.
Right, but the rate of gain on the fertilizer is not matching the rate of gain on the yield, right? So the more fertilizer you add is not getting you more bushels in the bin, right?
Not necessarily.
Not at the rate that it should be, right?
And they've got in my dad's lifetime, like he said, they used to buy fertilizer by the bag and put it in the trunk of the car.
Yeah.
Now folks are putting down 400, 500, 600, 700 pounds an acre.
Yeah.
And they're top dressing and they're spraying. Your picture is better tonight. Different camera. I mean, substantially better. I think that's the same camera.
It's the same camera.
But the whole thing is a little bit different. Stan's done quite a bit of work up here.
Yeah.
And somehow that self-adjusts because it says every once in a while, adjusting camera quality.
Oh, does it? Okay.
It did it on the TikTok for sure.
Right. Okay. So it's the same camera that we've ran here for the last year, but I'm hardwired into the internet with the computer. So, yeah, that's the only difference. Maybe the wife's not watching Murder, She Wrote in the house.
Sure.
Using up some bandwidth. I'm not
She's
sure.
Sharing a little bit this evening.
Yeah.
But even I don't know. You even got it. You got it all set right. It's getting it's doing justice to what this place is.
Yeah, I don't know. Living rural, there's just no option for me to make that internet any faster than it is right now.
No,
the technology doesn't exist where we're at. So
no, definitely not.
This is pretty much as good as it could potentially ever get without without being live, right? If we could do pre-recording and we could improve the video quality that way, because you can slow everything down. But for live, you need lots of data transfer back and forth, right? So,
Yeah. Well, you could see that whatever on the bottom of that. That's why I think TikTok didn't work so well, because it wasn't, I don't know, wasn't keeping up or whatever. I'm not too sure, but
yeah, TikTok definitely needs different speed, right? So I find that TikTok, I don't know why, but it works much better off of mobile than it does off of the TikTok Studio for some reason.
okay.
That's just my experience. I don't know why, but anyways, no matter. We're here.
We're here.
Something kind of poetic and primal, perhaps, about having a drink in the shop, hey?
I know.
As opposed to the house.
It's totally different.
Yeah, and I know, like I've heard some guys are like, oh, like you go for drinks in your shop or whatever, like, and they're thinking like it's like shop beers,
right?
You know, it's not like, you know, okay, well, we got comfy chairs in the house, so we got comfy chairs up here,
right?
You know we don't have in the house. There's a fucking MIG welder. That's what we got in the shop. Like, so it's just a whole different.
The atmosphere is
completely atmosphere. Yeah.
Completely different. I really enjoy it up here.
Yeah, I think I'm going to close in that wall. I'm going to close it all the way into the attic hatch, and then we'll put like.
Well, we're running out of shelving here.
We're going to move the books. We're going to move the books somewhere. Maybe move the books back, and then we'll open up more shelving, more options over here, and then I'd like to get some like old-timey picture frames and get like do that like an art wall.
Sure.
Like have like Robbie Burns and then like, you know, King Charles III kind of thing. Like, you know, do some like
I feel it.
Really uptown kind of old school vibes. The white tin though doesn't really, you don't see it on the camera, but it's quite glaring over there. I'd like to cover it up.
Can all be done. Mm-hmm. Mr. Diesel Power, good evening.
Good evening. What do you think of the cigar so far?
I'm really digging it. It's gone. It was strong off the start.
Yeah.
And then it went totally mild here in the middle.
Out, eh?
Like
after the first third.
You almost don't even. It doesn't even really feel smoky. It's burning like perfect. I think that's been in the humidor for the exact amount of time before it should be smoked.
It's interesting too. So I've been monitoring that humidity level religiously because we've had like a significant weather shift that's occurred, right? Up and down and up and down. And so coming in here like every 2 days, where's the humidity at? And it's been riding like perfectly at 72%.
We got lucky with that humidor because there was a ton of research around glass top humidors and the fact that they are not,
they don't seal,
they're
right?
They're not the best for sealing. Yeah. Now they did say when you drop that lid, you should hear that.
Yeah, you hear
and you do.
You hear it getting exhausted out, right?
So yeah, we haven't had any spoilage, which is very lucky because we've got a substantial holding in there now.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too, like I don't put a lot of guys use distilled water, and I think a few people even cheap out just use tap water in their humidifiers.
Okay.
And I've on a few cigar pages that I participate in, we always see some guys that are like, oh, is this mold or is this plume? Well, there's no such thing as plume. Plume is like
salvage.
It's a made up word, really. It's like how you reconcile yourself that your cigar is moldy, but you're still going to smoke it. But at the end of the day, it's moldy. So we don't use that. We use a glycol, like a 70% glycol solution, and it's got mold inhibitors or whatever. Like,
okay.
What do they call that? Maybe it's down here. Antifungal properties.
Okay.
So it kind of, protects your investment, right? Brigham Humidor Solution. Antifungal. Climate sensitive cigar humidor solution. Regulates humidity to a perfect 70%.
Excellent.
It's just propylene glycol. But
the rest of the folks that piled in here, make sure you leave a comment and let us know you're in here.
Yeah.
This is the start of live stream season. We really look forward to this.
Usually the
get
weather's
together.
much worse, much earlier than
It
this.
is.
We've already done a couple. Either that or you're still in a combine. It's kind of up in the air, right?
Mm-hmm. And we've been lucky the last 2 years. We've even with our falls, like who would think you'd get such nice weather for so long, and you just can't. You can't justify coming and sitting and wasting. I guess not wasting, but using up an evening when there's so much to be doing outside before the weather does close because we know it's coming.
Fix, right? You know, you just reminded me of that water. I'm just gonna try something because it is just a little bit on overpowering,
I was
overwhelming.
gonna say it's actually a little bit harsh. Usually by drink 3 or 4, things have mellowed out, and this is not.
The palate is usually acclimated to whatever volatile compounds in the whiskey, so I'm just gonna put a little drop.
But
This is still, there's just that little bit left of the original water.
I'm gonna try a drop as well. It's also possible we did irreversible damage.
We might have, yeah. They could be just like
Too.
full liver rebellion going on.
But
let's try this. Or it could just be like it's actually not a good whiskey.
Well, we haven't.
I feel like that did not help.
Well, you haven't let it do its thing yet.
Well, I mean, I think that the old swisheroo.
But we haven't really encountered a terrible whiskey. Really.
Oh no, there's definitely one in there for sure. There is.
Well, was it the Highland Park that you read the?
Oh, Highland Park was good.
Somebody dumped it down there. I can't remember which one you had read. It was the one where we paired with the.
Well, maybe Highland Park was the one that Buddy said it tasted like iodine, and it was. But I actually didn't mind that one. I thought that was quite nice. But Craigalackie, I think, was one that we didn't enjoy. The second one over on the bottom shelf.
Okay.
And I don't think so. There's that bottle of Letitch right beside it. I don't know if we tried that one yet.
Oh. Interesting.
Let's blow towards the end of this thing.
I swapped tequila 27 years ago. The smell of it turns my guts. Yeah, I can't disagree with you there. I've never been a tequila drinker. Yours went out, eh?
Yeah, it's gone out a couple times.
You should have done the V cut.
But no, I got a straight cut. I got lots of airflow, but guy gets bullshitting or whatever.
Maybe too much.
Too much bullshitting.
Too much airflow.
Yeah, too much yapping.
Needs to hold back. Needs some back pressure. Ooh.
Yeah, so how do you think that was going to play out with our neighbors to the south there?
I had money on the female. I did. I would have bet dollars.
So why do you think it went wrong? I shouldn't say wrong. Why do you think it went the way it did?
I don't know. I would see. I have no real hard opinions on who I think would be a better fit. Doesn't matter to me, right? I put very little stock into our politicians in the Western world. I do not believe they really are that influential. I was having this discussion with a gentleman today. The world is the world, and it knows what it needs. People got to eat. Trading has to happen. Yeah. It really doesn't matter who's occupying the highest office in Canada or the United States, at least not in my opinion. There obviously are going to be a tremendous amount of people that strongly disagree with that.
Yeah.
However, I do think that there are more folks in the middle who want to leave some of the extremes alone, and they just sort of want to exist. And in my mind, in my opinion, Donald Trump does seem to be the more moderate, certainly of the two parties. He's more about just working and kind of leaving the other things alone.
Right.
And maybe that's what swayed the whole entire thing. All those voters came out. I think it was still only a third of the country or 2/3 of the country voted.
Right.
Was there something like 70 some million that didn't even vote?
I think it's interesting though to see like how a candidate like him plays the game, and I would say like that's exactly what it is. Plays the game is that if he knows if he goes for the middle of the road, the centrists, there's a very good chance that he's going to lose that to the other party. So he swings so far to the right to get the the kind of the banjo picking overall wearing, like,
Sure.
he gets those folks. But how is it that he managed to still to do that, right? And say all manner of extraordinary, which is wild and wacky things, and still get the folks that were undecided or in the middle of the road to come out and vote for him. And I think, at least what I thought, in my opinion, was that overwhelmingly the American public looked at the democratic process, right? So did we have a candidate on the opposite side that was put in that position democratically? Was she chosen? Was she nominated? What did she run through? Primaries and all that, same as any other candidate? Or was it that they essentially staged a coup to get rid of Joe Biden and then didn't follow the democratic process to replace him, right?
That is a good point.
Earlier, they should have just said, like, Joe, you're done, way earlier in the race, like before it even began, and then had her nominated, and I think she would have taken it at that point, right? But the American people were like, I mean, we're not going to stand for ousting old Joe, no matter how sleepy and incapable of walking up a set of stairs he is. Like, that's not the country we live in, right? And they would rather go with a 78-year-old multiply convicted felon who's groping a bunch of women, and even the black and Latino crowd came out and voted for him despite all the terribly racist things he said. That was actually another interesting thing. I was watching, I forget what news channel it was out of the States there last night, but they were like, oh, Trump got the black vote and he got the Latino vote and he got, and it's like, is that really how politics in the US is still structured? Like, do people vote by their ethnicity, or do they not vote by their regional cultural values?
Sure, I get where you're coming with that. I
like in Western Canada, we have, I would say, arguably a different set of values and principles, different set of needs, maybe, than say they do in Eastern Canada, and that's why we see that there's more conservative voters in the West than there are in the East. But down there, it's like more ethnic and cultural differences than they geographical differences, right?
They certainly speak to that quite a bit, and to me, as I said earlier, I put very little stock in the leaders of the Western world.
Yeah.
I think it's the only way to stay relevant and to keep the general population engaged is to make it exciting, to make it interesting, to come up with these scenarios and to use these statistics and things like that. Otherwise, it's pretty much just boring.
Right.
It's not right. They don't even, in my eyes, and certainly in Canada, you can see it with our conservative leader. Nobody seems to really running on anything except for discrediting the other guy. That's the basis of how they run now.
Yeah.
Right. They play to their base. They drum up emotion, and then they just criticize everything all the time. I don't believe in the last probably 2 or 3 years that I've been watching things like C-SPAN and stuff like that anybody's ever said a compliment or anything about something the other side has done.
Yeah, nobody's ever reached across the room and said, actually, that's a pretty good suggestion. How do you suggest we could implement that strategy? Nobody's ever said that.
And to me, that's one of the most shocking things in the Western world, that I despise party politics for that reason. And like you just said, even a conservative in the West is going to have substantially different needs and issues than a conservative in suburban East. They're not. You might have some traditional conservative values that you align with, but as far as the economy and things, we're vastly different. And then what we end up with is a two-party system where everybody's got to fit into this jar, and they rarely even can agree themselves. So they have to create just a general policy, which is lackluster at best. Like it really addresses nothing ever. It's just a bunch of ideas. Nothing gets implemented ever.
No.
And no matter who's in charge with a majority, a minority, or a coalition government, nothing ever changes because it's just a battle back and forth. I mean, to watch our House of Commons is a complete disaster. That's the most unintelligent way to spend an afternoon, is to watch them debate anything.
Yeah, the only thing that would be more unintelligent would be to be there and to actually engage in that said debate.
Yeah, to participate, right?
Which is basically it's just a food fight made of words.
With a totally incompetent ringleader as a speaker.
Yeah.
And that's at the federal level, but even at our provincial levels, our House leaders, our speakers are terrible. They demand no control.
Yeah, no, it's chaos, right? Absolute chaos. Yeah, and a lot of partisan politics, even on the part of the speaker, like muting microphones and things, and like, we shouldn't be doing that. We should have a higher level of respect and authority to be able to, that's our elected officials. Like, I get that they can be passionate about things, but how could we honestly say that we have representation? You think about, like, we've got Chris Warkentine, right, locally here. But
yeah. I
don't know when the last time he stood up and said anything sensible or that actually represented our area.
Well, I went in and where did I hear this? I didn't realize how this worked, but our effectively backbencher MPs,
they don't really get much of an opportunity.
They get something like this is structured. They get something like one question every 6 weeks or something. Yeah. These questions they're formulated questions with formulated answers, and you can see this is what shocks me, because for a while I thought, you know what, young man should probably get involved, pay attention to this, right?
Sure.
This is going to matter to me. That was very short-lived.
Yeah.
So once I started to pay attention and I watched people ask questions, and if they were answered, they were answered off of a piece of paper.
Right.
And I'm thinking, how can you ask somebody a question and have them read something off of a piece of paper? Right. Like, this is totally scripted.
That's not debate anymore, right?
And then when they don't want to answer the question, they completely segue off into absolute nothingness with no control from the Speaker of the House.
Filibuster, you're right. They just dance around it and don't actually accomplish it.
And there's absolutely no control for someone to say, look, that's not what he asked you. Yeah. That's not the question she put forth. Could you please answer the question? And the whole entire thing, even down to our municipal levels, is just a real behind the scenes situation. Everything you see is, wow, this is privileged information. This is how in a free and fair democratic system do you have so much behind the scenes going on? I argued with a few people. I said, how does an elected official have so much privileged information?
Do they, or do they just not? Like, they just not have the information? It's easier to say it's privileged or it's confidential than to be like, I don't know, and be embarrassed, right?
Well, I would appreciate the I don't know. I've said that's almost daily in my life, and then I go to find the answer.
Yeah.
But the honesty of not just trying to lie to someone's face or dance around or make something up is...
But that's what I see with a lot of those questions, right? It's like, one question is pointed at another individual across the floor. It's like, what is this? Or like, how many housing starts have you had? And then they just give you some bullshit answer. It doesn't answer the question. It's like, you can clearly see they don't know.
Right.
Right. And is it acceptable to be like, you know what? I don't have that information just in my pocket. Like, so, stop asking me questions like that don't matter. But at the end of the day, I don't have that information just sitting right here. But next question period, I can come back to you with that, right?
With as heavily weighted as our government in Canada is, there's what 200 and some seats in the House, I think, and then not to mention there is just a throng of support staff. These questions are the information has to be there.
Oh, it's there.
Somebody in the building knows where to find it.
Yeah, you would even think like the guy behind Polyev or the guy behind Trudeau could literally just Google the answer.
Just look it up, right?
Just like show them their phone or whatever, and it'd be right there. Like
they also don't seem to be covering much. And so we did that whole live stream on what's the movie Idiocracy. Every day since we did that live stream and every day since we've seen that movie, whenever I watch Western politics, I draw extreme parallels between the two. This is amazing. This is amazing how comical we've made.
How far we've come from a movie that was 20 years ago. We're just we're only shy by putting Gatorade on the plants.
We're almost there.
We're
almost there.
So that's going to be our solution for the drought. What do they call it?
Rondo,
Rondo,
the thirst mutilator. Yeah, it's shocking to me to see that because you would expect much better. But Chad had said it's amazing that in 30 million people or 300 million people that was the best too. We do know better here, and I was wondering that what would ever sway the general population to vote in say a slate of independents. So you had however many seats there are in the House.
Yeah.
Every one of them filled by an independent, someone who did not toe a party line. I don't know how you could elect a leader out of that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think we could effectively do that because we don't have, because you're trying to get seats, right?
Sure.
So how would you have a governing party?
And I guess that's the reason that doesn't happen. I suppose.
You'd have anarchy.
But it would be very interesting to see. We'll just say 200. If there was 200 representatives for the country to fill 200 seats, and to have an actual question period where those who had relevant business for the day could speak to the other 199 individuals and come up with a clear-cut plan that benefited their constituents and the country as a whole, and then just work to get things done. There was no general partisan policy that had to be followed, no matter if you were from the farthest north or the farthest south or the farthest west or east or in oil country or in the lower mainland or in the northern part of Ontario.
Right. You would have to eliminate the party system altogether to make that function, right? So you'd have to have local, regional representation that was elected from, a collection of nominees, essentially, with no party affiliation whatsoever. So they'd have to make a nomination, be elected to be your MP. And then similar to how the counties or the MDs run it, is that from amongst themselves, they would then elect a first minister.
Sure.
Right? Or a prime minister, right? But I don't know. Could you get a couple hundred people in a room that could align on that? It would maybe be like the Pope, right? Like you get 200 people in a room and you cast a ballot and then they have to settle on, you pick 6 and then you just keep shortlisting until,
sure,
white smoke comes up the chimney kind of thing, right?
Well, I would love to see it play out for say one election cycle, because I don't think to the Canadian taxpayer it would be a huge burden. You could run yourself as far as campaigning. I'm getting a little bit tired of seeing the signs blown all over the county anyways.
Right.
Both in municipal and federal and provincial elections, or in all 3 elections, I guess. That's sort of an outdated way of doing it. There's all sorts of media. There's all sorts of social media. There's radio stations
Yeah,
and TV stations and
we
things.
can't have plastic straws. We can't have fucking plastic knives and forks, but we can, choke a fucking moose on an axe attack sign, like
Right, and just and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them littering the entire country. I wish we could abolish that altogether. I don't think you'd see a large amount of people running anyways. Because you can run as an independent already, and people don't. I do believe the reason most people don't is they know there isn't a chance anyways.
Right.
Like and especially where like here, there's really no point in even holding an election. Just whoever the conservatives decide,
right,
we just give it to them because it's never going. No one else is ever going to win.
You don't ever really hear somebody campaigning for that. Like that's still like run like as an old boys club. Like
it is
that nominee is already chosen the minute the other guy says they're going to retire. And
right. And there's no need to hold an election. The NDP, the Liberals, the Greens, and no independent is ever going to take Northern Alberta. It's not going to happen. So I also don't give them credit, right? I mean, the odd one dances around and over time, and has said, we've done these things. Well, Northern Alberta is the way it is because of the oil, the trees.
Resource
right?
Rich, yeah.
That's why it is the way it is. I was joking with a while ago with somebody. I said the Green Party could lead or be in control of Northern Alberta, and it would not slow down drilling.
No,
right? They would still pipeline, they'd still mine, they'd still drill, and they'd still log.
With an NDP government in Alberta already,
right? We still
build pipelines. We
right?
Still drill wells.
The private sector has an unimaginable amount of power. Over the public sector, so you don't get to claim that your area is a success because of you, right? It's a success in spite of you.
That's right.
And if you're from wherever, northern Saskatchewan or Manitoba, the land of 1,000 lakes, and there's really nothing going on there, you're most likely just going to struggle, right? You're going to have a tremendous oil patch or tourism industry, or because you kind of are just you've got a block of land that isn't really all that valuable.
What actually happens in Manitoba, anyways?
I don't know how that's sliced up. There's probably just like 2 representatives.
I've never been to Manitoba, so I don't even know. Like, is it just like Saskatchewan 2.0 with more water, or?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the little bit that I know about it would be from ice road truckers, and they seem to just haul some generators and some groceries up there on the ice road. And
like I just,
stop off at a few.
But I just assume that it's like grain farmers, polar bears. Like
I don't think there's a whole bunch happens north of whatever parallel that is, but
north of Winnipeg.
She sort of just turns into the Barrens.
I should probably read a map. That would be beneficial. It's hard to criticize our neighbors in the U.S. when I don't even know what happened in fucking Manitoba.
Well, I think the reason the guy doesn't because there's not a whole bunch happening there, right? I mean, there's very uncharted, I suppose.
Yeah, still a wilderness, really, to some degree. Better shut that thing off.
But speaking of that, so who do you got for? I don't even know when our federal election is. Do you think?
Well, I mean,
the man in charge is going to. He seems hell bent on staying in power, despite multiple calls to.
There's a significant percentage of his own party, but not significant enough to alter his mindset, or even to really be a threat to him. Right? 20 people isn't enough to really. 22 people, I think, isn't enough to unseat him. So he's, if he's got the support, he's gonna ride it out. I saw Francois there today was talking about, he's ready to unseat the government. Pierre Poilievre is ready to unseat the government, but the NDP is, although they've said they've torn up, that's because they realize that they lack relevance. If a conservative government comes in, this would be Canada's FU vote, and
sure,
Poilievre would most largely take a majority government, and the NDP wouldn't. They wouldn't have any ability to do anything, right? So the Conservatives would probably roll back the seniors' dental care. They'd probably roll back, the funding for fucking furries or whatever. Like,
Sure.
all the kind of artsy fartsy stuff that lots of stuff, we're just hammered would probably roll back. And so the NDP wouldn't have the ability to kind of, have any kind of hold or cultural relevance in Canadian government anymore. It'd be a huge setback for their party. So it's beneficial to them to kind of prop up, even though they won't call it propping up. They're just basically hanging on to a fucking scrap of wood in the hopes that the Liberal government doesn't go down.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we do go to an election, I'm sure that, that'll be the end of the NDP. Conservatives will be in bed with the Bloc, but they'll very quickly, I think, would have a falling out.
Sure.
Right. And I think that there would be a lot of Conservative voters that would realize very quickly that Poilievre's a lot of catchphrases.
Sure.
But not a lot of realistic action, right? His whole platform has been, well, much like the McDonald's strategy, right? Like you don't have to be great at anything. You just have to be not fucking terrible. It's really easy to point out how terrible the other guy is at this point in time, right?
It is.
You don't have to say what you're going to do. You just have to say what terrible fucking things the other guy's done, right? You just have to comment, oh, the price of groceries are so high, the price of tax is so high. Like, I'm a little bit concerned, like even having, worked 25 years in the oil and gas industry, this whole, like, let's axe the tax, I'm not a carbon tax advocate, whatsoever, right? I think that's a terrible way to manage it. Okay, so we're going to axe it, but what are we going to do instead? How are you going to regulate emissions?
Sure.
In Canada, right? Now, it shouldn't be with a production cap. It shouldn't be with, taxation, but there's got to be a way that you can have sustainable production growth without, poisoning the fucking planet at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't see that vision there. I see, okay, let's take full advantage of the Liberal downfall. And I don't have to promise anything. There's a lot of politicians, they don't make their platform promises. They don't make their election promises. But does Poilievre made one election promise other than axe the tax? What's going to happen to schools? What's going to happen to education? What's going to happen to healthcare?
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the folks on the left, when you follow them on social media, any sort of platform, they bring that up. That's the number one thing they bring up in regards to him, is the fact that he's got a whole bunch to say about the Liberals, but really not much to say about the future. So,
yeah,
like yourself, I'm not a carbon tax advocate either. However, I was watching one gentleman explain it as a way to, I guess, invoke change in people's, like, in the way they operate day to day. It's to change attitudes, and that's fine. Especially, at least in my eyes, it seems to be somewhat relevant, because in the West we've become extremely wasteful.
Well, see, that's what bothers me so much in the West, is there's so much money, there's so much resources. There's probably not a place in Canada outside of Alberta where there's just so much disposable income and just overall wealth.
And spread amongst so many
Right.
so many folks.
So many folks.
It's certainly concentrated in Vancouver, and it's concentrated in Toronto.
Right. But overall, the average population in Alberta, and that's not to say there's not folks that are below the poverty line, and they struggle every day. Those people do exist. But the overwhelming population of Alberta is wealthier than anywhere else in the country. And yet, I can't get a doctor. I can't get surgery, I just, so my well-being, my health and well-being, the things that all the money in the world can't buy me more life, more
right,
health. right? And so, well, my $40 a month Alberta healthcare payment that I used to pay, but I don't pay now because it's somehow buried in my income tax. But like, we don't have any doctors, we're the nurses. We can't put an ambulance on the road. Like, what in the fuck? Like, that's, to me, is like, but I know that's a provincial problem, but that should be a federal priority.
But you see, we were talking about how folks vote. Culturally, I think culturally in the West, we have not been prioritizing any of those things. We've taken a lot of those things for granted, right? A lot of us laughed off the disaster of the Grand Prairie Hospital costing almost $1 billion or something by the time it was done, when it was slated for something like $100 million.
Yeah.
We really shouldn't be laughing those things off. You see a lot of people that are, they say, well, it should be our choice what we drive for a vehicle and how many times we drive it and all these things, and I get that. That's one of the benefits for working as hard as we do, for living in Canada, for living in the West. We don't have the greatest climate, so we gotta cherry pick what we celebrate. However, when you see the tremendous waste of all the infrastructure sitting idle, our RVs, to me, is one thing that's amazing. There's almost no place to park one anymore because we've taken agricultural production land out of production to park RVs on.
Yeah.
And you drive by these places and the RV hasn't moved all year. You can tell because nobody whippersnip the grass or anything around it.
Yeah, the grass is growing up.
You try to get a spot in the park for the weekend, you got to take your camper out Monday and leave it there and pay from Monday to Friday, and then you only go out and enjoy it Friday, Saturday, and you leave Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon. Yeah. And these things we're prioritizing over, well, certainly over the environment, but even over like basic necessities.
Yeah, you remember Jim Prentice when he was the Premier of Alberta for a spell there?
I vaguely do.
He died in a plane
crash. I think he was had an early demise with aviation.
He did say, and it was very, very unpopular for saying this, especially as a conservative premier. But he said Albertans need to take a good, long, hard look in the mirror.
Yeah, he did say that. I remember that.
Very well, poorly received. Okay, I mean, he could have said that. He could have said that exact thing, but just framed it slightly different. But there is definitely a level of financial maturity in Alberta that is reminiscent of like an old mining town.
Sure.
It's still, whiskey and hooers kind of thing. Like, we make money, and work hard, and we play hard. And, right. But there was a spell, right, where we definitely, like, post World War, where we actually, like, holy fuck, we should probably build some infrastructure. And throughout the 1960s and 1970s, things were actually really fantastic in a lot of these small towns that, we lived nearby, and they had bowling alleys, and they had dairies, and they had movie theaters, and
sure,
every community became self-sufficient. They all had clean drinking water, and the streets were paved, and things were actually pretty good. But then once it was there, we haven't maintained any of it, and now all that disposable income is going into fucking lift kits and diesel trucks and fucking Netflix accounts, and your kids all have fucking iPads, and there's never been a time in history, I think, where we've had more.
Sure.
Right? But we're still like, I don't want to pay for that. Like, there's a lot of greed that occurs without much foresight into what's coming down the pipe. Like, I fear for our kids, like, because we're going to be back to the fucking dirt trails and like.
Well, there's an unsettling amount of reality in that tough men create. How does it go?
Tough men create good times make soft men create
hard times create tough
like
men,
that.
right?
Yeah.
And you're right, all across Alberta, for sure, we have been running an infrastructure deficit. We've been building in the urban centers we've been building, they're getting hospitals, they're getting schools, they're getting arenas, they're getting all sorts of things. The rural settings are getting basically scraps, but they're not doing anything for themselves either. One big thing that's always bothered me is the the foregoing and the forgiveness of income tax to corporations when they set up, no matter how big they are, small businesses too.
Yeah.
They're always demanding provisions and things. We'll set up a shop in your town, but we don't want to pay taxes. We don't want to do this. We don't want to do that. Yeah. We don't want
concessions all the time. Right?
All of the time. And I mean, I suppose it would be nice enough to be able to afford to do that, but certainly on a case by case basis, when you come in with say, $200 million in assets and you're expanding.
Right. Like if you're the Ford Motor Company of Canada and you're coming in to build a factory that's going to employ 3,000-4,000 people, that's maybe a bit different.
And we do that on a federal level too, right? You see the subsidies handed out, right? Oh, so and so wants to build an EV plant, so we're gonna forgive them $500 million. Well, I don't know, right? And then they start to dissect that and say, well, this is going to create 80 jobs. You're thinking like, that's a lot of money.
Yeah,
that's a lot of money.
Well, that's for the whole like Heinz ketchup thing, like all like totally caused a big rift in Canada. It was like they bought the factory in Leamington, Ontario, and then they shut it down, and like 2,500 people all lost their jobs. And so like fuck Heinz, like everybody went to French's because
it's funny you bring up ketchup. I went to town with Corey a couple weeks ago. We were doing the grocery shop and we got to the ketchup aisle, and I actually Googled it because it was something I had seen on the internet. I think they had 4 different kinds of ketchup, and then how Canadian they were from the headquarters down to the product.
Right.
And I believe it was President's Choice was the only one that was strictly Canadian. It was all Canadian.
That's President's Choice is Galen Weston, right?
So anyways,
hate him too, right?
We landed on that one because it was mostly Canadian. Yeah. Of course, nobody's going to be without fault. I don't think well, you said about greed, right? These people, they're right. That's another thing that we've shifted to, and it was actually I think it was that the Cortez AOC in the States. She was talking in on one of the boards or whatever she sat on, and she was saying we've become in the West, we've become basically an economy of essentially fees. We don't actually create anything new. We just sort of charge things, and you can really see that.
Yeah.
With even this at the smallest level of things that we deal with. So Ritchie Brothers, for instance, they've, in my mind, they've come up against a wall of how to generate value, because they've already they're the best at what they do.
That's right.
And they've now they've hit a wall. So COVID gave them a way out.
They peaked, right?
To lay off tremendous amount of staff and go all online.
Just go online. Yeah.
That was fine. Through COVID, that worked. Sales were up. Revenues were up. Okay, now they're there, and the shareholders are demanding an increase in revenue and an increase in dividends.
Yeah.
And where do you do it now? So you just add fees.
You can't sell more equipment.
You just add fees. You add fees. Yeah. You eliminate staff. You eliminate infrastructure. You sell off things, and then where do we go in the next? And it's not far out in my mind. It's not the next 30 years. It's the next 5 to 10. When these monocle wearers are sitting around their boardroom tables and they're thinking about how to generate profits for investors, where do you go? You ask for concessions from the country,
sure, or
handouts from the country.
But wouldn't it be great if they had, if they could diversify their portfolio a little bit so they could sustain commodity shifts or economic shifts a little bit, and not have to have stupid things like buyer premiums? Like that drives me up the wall. Like,
it's a lot.
Why do I pay you come to your venue and buy? Like, why is that not like a seller premium?
Sure.
Or consignor premium? I get it. Like, if I want to take something there and you sell it on my behalf, you as the auction company, you take a cut. But me as the buyer, why am I paying you to facilitate what? Like, I could have gone to Facebook Marketplace. I could have gone to Windsor Ford. I could have gone to wherever and bought. I could have gone to Uncle Wiener's and bought that, and,
Right.
you know, and not paid any premium. Especially for some of the stuff that we're looking for, like gates and panels and stuff like that. Well,
Sure.
I can go to the wholesaler and get it, and not pay anybody.
Right.
So, yeah.
It's very interesting how
The wall.
just kind of where we're at with all of that stuff. And I know for a fact, because I am one myself, but the consumer is finding it hard to shoulder all of this. It's far too much, right? It's taking everything. I talked to a lot of people throughout the day coming through, and you know, basically everybody admits that, you know, like, they're making good money, and it seems to be treading water at best.
Right.
Things are still out of reach. Things are still extremely expensive or not available, and nobody really knows why. And I mean, it seems to have stemmed from 5 years ago. It's just that post, during, and pre-COVID era where everything changed.
Definitely, like, I think, yeah, that if we think about like a moment in time in our memory that changed the world, think about that shift that blocked the canal during, you know, when half the world was in isolation.
The old Evergreen or whatever.
The Evergreen, yeah.
Evergiven.
Whatever it was called, the given fuck all. Like,
Evergiven.
The lag that occurred there, we still have not recouped from that.
No.
Like, that just set a new standard. So you think about like price gouging, right? So, you know, how much inflation really is versus how much people are like gouging a little bit and saying, oh, fuck, inflation's up, right? Well, the same is true with like shipping and handling. Like, oh, fuck, it's back ordered, right? I can't get it to you for 17 weeks. Well, can you? Or are you just shipping it from China on the back of a fucking mule, like as slow as it can possibly go? Whereas, you know, previously it would get here on an airplane and it would be here over like the next day or within a week kind of thing, right? Like, that was a huge shift in how we get parts and how we get resources to places on the planet. And like, it has a major economic impact. It's driven the price up everywhere. But then all the suppliers, the cost of shipping that, although it takes 6 times as long, you know, they're still like, oh, it's going to take, you need to pay $150 to get this item here from Edmonton. What? Like,
right? I'll
drive to Edmonton, go get it.
Well, that's been a huge thing, and I've encountered it in probably some of the smallest scales, but some of our, what do you call them, distributors, I guess, like for instance, the guy I get the bags from.
Right.
Those are made, I think, in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
So,
but you're not the only guy that uses them.
Right? You watch this tracking, and you get these updates, and it's just like, your product has been, your order's been filled. It's at whatever port, whatever CCAN number. And then 4 weeks later, you find out it's been held up somewhere in the Middle East, and you're thinking like,
why is it even there?
All right, fair enough. And then, you go from, say, a March delivery to September, and you're still wondering where it is, right? And it's still held up. And then during that time, the cost of shipping has gone up another 35%. And you're thinking like, this is wild, because for years, certainly when I was younger, I remember whenever we needed parts or anything, you'd get in the truck, you go to town with your dad, and you'd go to wherever, and they would have it. If they didn't have it, it was in Mayerthorpe, or it was in Edmonton. It would be overnighted on the Greyhound.
That's right.
Now, and I just encountered this with that telehandler. I was quite nervous because that's a 2003, and sort of since all this happened, I mean, this certainly wouldn't be the first time where I was met with that part's unavailable. Like, you can't even get it anymore.
No.
Okay, well, we'll just throw it away, I suppose. But to my surprise, when I got a hold of Finning, they had everything. Things were scattered around. Some was in Seattle, but they had it all. And the parts were going to be right around $5,000 and at least a week away.
Yeah.
So then, because the internet has made the world extremely small, I jumped on the internet. I had the part numbers. I knew what I needed. I sent an email to I don't even know how this website works, but I guess they source the parts for you.
Right.
Maybe the end user pays them. I'm not exactly sure because I never paid them anything. So to get these parts was going to be a grand total of $1,100 American, and was supposed to be here today between 1 and 5.
Right.
I'm not sure. Maybe they are there. I don't know.
Right.
But so you see things like that, and you wonder. So a big company like Finning, I would say should be embarrassed. They have one of the largest warehouses in Claremont.
There's a global company that moves parts.
And they have a massive facility, like almost arguably an inland terminal in Grand Prairie. And I wonder what's in it.
Yeah.
Because and I got to looking, and these parts are interchangeable through a lot of backhoes and some compactors, and so it's not specific, right?
The machine.
Yeah. And the other thing too that is like lots of people I think realize, and if they don't, they should. Very few times are parts made for a machine. Generally, a machine's made around something interesting.
Yeah. It's got the same fuel pump, the same solenoid.
When you go in and they start to ask you all these
bearings,
penetrating questions, it's more or less irrelevant. The part is swappable, interchangeable for a wide variety of machines and applications. Yeah. So why do we not
brand even, right?
Outside of the brand? So because that's the other thing, right? Generally, in this case, the Planetary may or may not even be made by Finning. You see it a lot in trucks, like the running gear isn't even made by Kenworth. In fact, the only thing Kenworth about a Kenworth is the hood ornament.
It's the decal.
And I'm sure they don't make it either. No. That's really the only thing that separates it from anything else. Yeah. The seats are made by somebody else. The radio is Panasonic or whatever. Right. All the inverters are from another company. The running gear, the tires, like the rims, nothing specific. So
Bosch and Goodyear and all that kind of stuff.
So it's frustrating to see everything being at least a week away, when, like you said earlier, there's really nothing on the planet that's a week away.
No.
I mean, you can hit the airport tomorrow morning and be in Beijing tomorrow afternoon.
I remember every year, mid-2000, working on a rig, bust a tooth off a drill bit, pull out of the hole. We put a fish in an overshot in the back of a fucking taxi from Edmonton and hot shotted that shit out to the rig in a fucking taxi. Like, we can do that.
Right.
But it'd be unheard of today.
Sure.
Unheard. Oh, fuck. That's got to come out of Houston.
Right.
And 14 days, like, better start circulating, like, because you're going to be sitting.
It's incredible. And I think that, back to creating revenue, a lack of inventory is expensive, but so this lack of inventory also has created I expect an artificial surge in revenue.
Yeah, there's been a lot more centralization, like you say, like central warehousing or whatever. That's definitely occurred. We even see that with services, right? Like in the oil and gas industry, you try to phone for outside of a tank truck or a vac truck or like just the production side of things, but you need a resource to come out. It's coming out of Fort St. John, or it's coming out of Red Deer or Black Falls or somewhere. And it's like, well, are we not like outside of Fort McMurray, one of the largest producing areas in the province of Alberta? Like,
literally the epicenter.
Why am I waiting 6 hours for something to come out of Red Deer?
It's just not. Yeah, it's just not. It's just not there.
And just like that, it just went out again. Is that your first relight?
That's the first relight. And it started to burn uneven too, so I'm not exactly sure.
It's still burning pretty even, but
what had happened?
Maybe it's not perfect humidity. Maybe it is a little bit high.
Is there still one left on YouTube? I was gonna shut this down and fire up to TikTok again because it's
one's on YouTube. Yeah,
there's got to be one, but one quiet individual.
I don't know if it's Taylor or if it's diesel power there. Let us know in the comments.
Chad had to go.
Yeah, the tenor.
So not exactly sure why I put this watch on. It's not even set to the right
Not even
time.
wound up. Yeah, I got the same thing. Actually, it's midnight right now. We did have a fella from the old country there. He was asking what time
I seen that.
that was going to be on. 3 o'clock in the morning. So
I did see that.
You want to do the old switcheroo or what?
Yeah, I think we should. How did you do that? Whoever's on there, you must be a ghost. We're gonna try it again here.
Just hit the end stream right bottom center.
This wasn't